I worked for 10 years. 10 years of living in a tiny apartment, eating ramen, and saying no to every vacation. All to make one dream a reality, owning a 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback. That car wasn't just metal. It was a promise I made to myself. It was proof of every single struggle and sacrifice. As I turned onto the familiar street of my childhood home after a long business trip, I pictured the perfect moment my garage door would roll up, and the morning light would hit that deep metallic blue paint, shimmering like a jewel. But that's not what happened. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Amelia, and I have always been defined by the number 10. 10 years I worked, 10 years of living in a tiny apartment, eating ramen, and saying no to every vacation. All to make one dream a reality, owning a 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback. It was a secret I nurtured for years, an ambition my family never truly understood. When I was a little girl, my interests were always dismissed. At my 10th birthday party, my parents gave my sister Chloe a brand new art easel and a full set of professional paints, a gift worthy of a budding artist. They smiled, called her a prodigy, and celebrated her with a cake. For me, they handed me a small box containing a calculator and a book on computer programming, something practical for our sensible little girl. My father had said with a dismissive pat on the head, that day, I learned my worth was measured in logic, not love. That feeling of being an afterthought, of my passions being less than, followed me for years. It was why the car wasn't just a car, it was my vindication. The Mustang was my silent rebellion. It was the physical embodiment of a promise I made to myself that my worth would be defined by my own efforts, not my family's approval. I knew every curve of its body, the specific way the light caught its deep metallic blue paint, the familiar weight of its key in my palm. The car was me, and I was the car. I had spent countless hours researching its history, its specifications, and every detail of its restoration. It was a project of passion, a testament to my dedication. I had filled the garage with new tools and equipment, each one a small investment in a future I was building for myself, one bolt at a time. The garage was my sanctuary, a place where I could be alone with my dreams. I remember one Saturday afternoon, about a year ago. The sun was streaming through the garage window, catching dust motes dancing in the air. I was underneath the Mustang, wrestling with a stubborn bolt on the exhaust manifold. My hands were slick with grease, and I was getting frustrated. The garage door creaked open, and my father walked in, holding 2 bottles of cold soda. He didn't say much, just watched me for a moment. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. For the next hour, we worked together. He showed me a trick with the wrench he'd learned from his own father. His knuckles scarred just like mine were becoming. We didn't talk about Chloe's art gallery or my sensible job. We just talked about engines, about the satisfying click of a tool locking into place. As he left, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You've done a real fine job here, Ames." It was a rare moment of connection, a shared piece I clung to. The memory made the present reality feel like an even deeper cut. As I drove the rental car from the airport, a generic sedan that felt like a costume I couldn't wait to take off, a humming anticipation filled the air. My 3-hour drive was spent replaying memories of my childhood home, of the familiar streets, the scent of freshly cut grass, the worn-out front steps. I pulled into the driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires in a sound that felt both alien and familiar. The house looked exactly as I remembered it, but something was wrong. The garage door was closed. It was always open when I was coming home. A flicker of unease went through me, but I brushed it aside. Maybe they had just been tidy for a change. I got out of the car, my suitcase heavy in my hand, and walked toward the small, familiar side door. I inserted my key and pushed it open, stepping into the dim, cool air of the garage. The space was a void, the concrete floor, so often stained with oil and marked with the ghost of my car's tires, was eerily clean. A faint, lingering smell of gasoline and leather, a scent that had been a comfort to me for years, was gone. It was replaced by the sterile, dusty air of a room that hadn't been used in a long time. My heart, which had been beating with such steady excitement, felt like a small, cold stone in my chest. I dropped my suitcase with a dull thud, a wave of confusion. Then a sickening dread washed over me. I walked to the center of the garage, where my car should have been, but it was just a hollow space, a gaping wound. The perfect moment I had imagined was gone, replaced by this chilling, silent reality. My feet felt heavy as I walked toward the back door of the house. I opened it and stepped into the kitchen. My parents were sitting at the breakfast table, their heads bowed, a strained silence hanging in the air. My sister, Chloe, was there too, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, avoiding eye contact. My mother looked up, a forced smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "Amelia, honey, you're home," she said, her voice a little too bright. My father didn't say a word. He just stared at the tabletop, tracing the grain of the wood with his thumb. The silence was deafening, a thick, suffocating blanket that pressed down on me. I set my suitcase down and looked from one face to the next. No one said a word about the car. No one even mentioned the empty garage. I was the one who had to break the silence. "Where is the car?" I asked, my voice coming out as a whisper I didn't recognize. My mother's smile disappeared, and my father's shoulders sagged. Chloe looked up for a split second, her eyes full of guilt, before she quickly looked away. "Honey," my mother started, her voice soft. "We needed a little help. It was just a temporary thing." My father finally spoke, his voice low and apologetic. "Chloe needed a loan for her new business. The banks wouldn't give her a loan. We had to do something." I felt a cold rage begin to simmer in my veins. My car wasn't a family fund. It was my car, a result of my hard work. "You needed a little help," I repeated, my voice now dangerously low. "You needed a little help, so you sold my car?" My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. I didn't want her touch. I didn't want her soft words. My heart was pounding now, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I felt a betrayal so deep it was almost physical. They had taken my car, my dream, and given it away, and they thought they could just apologize for it. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. My father finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "We didn't sell it," he said, his voice a little stronger now. "We just pawned it. It's in a temporary hold. We'll get it back for you." I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished. It was a lie. I knew it. They had lied to me before. I knew they would lie again. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I opened my banking app. I checked my statements. My parents had access to my accounts for emergencies. I scrolled through the transactions. I saw it. A large transfer from a company called Auto Pawn. I had no idea what that was, but the amount was huge. It was the amount I had spent on the car. My hands were shaking now. This wasn't a pawn, it was a sale. I looked at my family, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "You didn't pawn it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You sold it. You sold my car." My mother started to cry, her head in her hands. My father just looked down at the table, his shoulders slumped. Chloe just stared at the floor, her face pale. I felt a terrible emptiness inside me. The car was gone. My trust was gone. The only thing I had left was a feeling of cold, quiet fury. "Who signed the papers?" I asked, my voice as hard as stone. "Who sold my car?" My father looked up at me, his eyes full of shame. "We did," he said, his voice barely audible. "We forged your signature." My heart, which I thought had already shattered, broke into a million pieces. I left the house without a word. I didn't pack my bags. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out the door, the cold air hitting my face. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I walked to the rental car and got in. I drove away from the house, the familiar streets now looking foreign and hostile. I drove to a hotel, my mind a blur. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the events of the day, the empty garage, the forced smiles, the lies, the forged signature. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, a betrayal that went beyond the car. It was a betrayal of a lifetime of trust, of a lifetime of love. The next morning, I called my lawyer friend, Sarah. I told her everything, the empty garage, the lies, the forged signature. She listened patiently, her voice calm and soothing. "Amelia," she said, "this is not just a family dispute. This is a felony. This is fraud. We can take this to court." I felt a flicker of hope. I had a choice. I could either let it go, or I could fight back. I knew what I had to do. I had to fight back. I couldn't let them get away with this. I had to show them that I was not a child they could manipulate. I had to show them that my dreams were not their playthings. I drove to a coffee shop and called Chloe. I told her to meet me there. She sounded surprised, but she agreed. When she arrived, she looked nervous, her eyes darting around the room. I didn't say a word. I just watched her, her face a mask of stone. She started to apologize, but I cut her off. "I'm not here for your apology, Chloe," I said, my voice flat. "I'm here to talk business." I pulled out a stack of papers and slid them across the table to her. It was a detailed financial analysis of her business plan, a plan that I had secretly run for her when she told me about it. It was a detailed report of her company's financials, with a detailed breakdown of her assets and liabilities, and her business plan. I had also created a detailed financial analysis of her business, and it was clear that she was not making a profit. "This is not a business, Chloe," I said. "It's a hobby, and a very expensive one." She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. "How did you get this?" she asked. I didn't answer, I just looked at her, her face a mask of stone. She looked at the papers, her face turning pale. She saw the numbers. She saw the truth. "I can't pay you back," she said, her voice shaking. I just looked at her. "I'm not asking you to," I said. "I'm telling you to." I slid another paper across the table. It was a contract that stated that she and my parents would repay me the full amount of the sale, plus interest, over a period of 10 years. It was a contract that stated that they would also pay for all the legal fees I had incurred. "I'm not going to bail you out, Chloe," I said. "You figure it out, or we'll all end up in court." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "You wouldn't do that," she said. I just looked at her, her face a mask of stone. "Try me." A week later, Chloe showed up unannounced at my hotel room door. She looked haggard. Her usually perfect hair was a mess, and her eyes were red-rimmed. "Amelia, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Don't do this to us, to Mom and Dad." I stood there, unmoved. "You were always the smart one, the responsible one," she continued, a note of bitterness creeping into her desperation. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be the prodigy, to have everyone expecting you to create magic out of nothing? I had to succeed. That gallery was my one shot to prove I wasn't a fraud." I looked at my sister, the golden child, and for the first time, I saw not a rival, but a terrified person drowning in expectations. "Your pressure doesn't give you the right to sell my dream, Chloe," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. "You made your choice, now live with it." I closed the door on her sobs, my own heart a tight, aching knot. The next few months were a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings. I worked closely with my lawyer, gathering evidence, preparing my case. I didn't talk to my family. I didn't answer their calls. I didn't respond to their texts. I just focused on my work. I was determined to get my car back. But there was a complication. Sarah called me one afternoon. "Bad news, Amelia. The pawn shop didn't hold the car. The title was clean because of the forged signature, so they sold it legally 2 weeks ago to a private collector." The floor dropped out from under me. It wasn't just a matter of paying off a debt anymore. My car was in the hands of a stranger. Sarah gave me the man's name, a Mr. Alistair Finch, and an address 3 states away. The fight just got a lot more personal. It wasn't just about money anymore. I had to go on a quest to find the physical embodiment of my dream. Chloe and my parents started to sell their belongings. Chloe sold her designer bags, her expensive clothes, her jewelry. My parents sold their old furniture, their old antiques. They even started to take on extra work. My father, who had been retired for years, took on a part-time job as a handyman. My mother, who had been a homemaker for most of her life, started to clean houses. They were all struggling. I knew they were struggling, but I didn't care. I had to show them that there were consequences for their actions. The final straw came when I found out that they were planning to sell the house. I was shocked. I didn't want to see them lose their home. I had to do something. I called my uncle, my father's younger brother. I told him everything. He listened patiently, his voice calm and soothing. "I'll help you, Amelia," he said, "but not in the way you think. I'm not going to bail them out. I'm going to help them fix this. For good." He flew out to Chicago the next day. We met at my lawyer's office. He brought my parents and Chloe with him. They all looked exhausted, their faces pale and drawn. We sat in the conference room, the silence heavy and suffocating. My uncle started to talk. He told them that he would help them, but only if they all signed a legal agreement to repay him. He was not bailing them out. He was just restructuring the debt. They all looked at each other, their faces filled with shame. They knew what they had to do. They signed the papers. They signed the papers with their heads bowed, their shoulders slumped. I watched them, my face a mask of stone. I felt no pity, no compassion, only a cold sense of victory. The next day, armed with the restructured funds, I drove for 12 hours to the address Sarah had given me. It was a beautiful farmhouse with a pristine, climate-controlled barn. Mr. Finch, an elderly man with kind eyes and hands stained with a lifetime of engine grease, met me at the door. He led me to the barn, and there it was, my Mustang. It looked more beautiful than ever, polished to a mirror shine. "She's a work of art," he said softly. My voice trembled as I told him my story, the 10 years of saving, the betrayal, the forged signature. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, running a hand over the car's fender. "A car like this isn't just metal and paint," he said finally. "It's a story. And from the sounds of it, her story belongs with you." He agreed to sell it back to me for exactly what he paid. Not a penny more. In his eyes, I saw the same respect my father had shown me that one Saturday afternoon, and it both healed and broke my heart. I drove my car home, but I didn't park it in my parents' garage. I parked it in front of my own new home, a small, cozy bungalow that I had bought with my own money. I didn't tell them I was home. I didn't tell them I had the car back. I just drove it home, and I left it there. A silent statement, a silent victory. A few days later, my mother called. "Amelia," she said, her voice shaking. "Can we talk?" I agreed. We met at my house. They all came, my parents, Chloe. They all looked different. They were older, more worn out. They looked like they had been through a war. My mother gave me a large envelope. It was a detailed repayment plan, a contract that stated that they would repay me the full amount of the sale, plus interest, over a period of 10 years. It was a contract that stated that they would also pay for all the legal fees she had incurred. I looked at the contract. I looked at them. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. They knew. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. I took the keys to the garage. I replaced the lock on the garage door and gave them a new set of keys. My mother looked at me, my eyes filled with tears. "Amelia," she said, "are you going to leave a spare key?" I looked at her, my face a mask of stone. "No," I said. I got in my car and drove away. I drove away. My car a symbol of my freedom, a symbol of my victory. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced in my rearview mirror. My mother and Chloe were huddled together on the porch, but my father stood alone at the edge of the driveway. He wasn't looking at me, but at the empty garage in his hand. He was holding a rusty old wrench, the same one he had used to help me with the exhaust manifold that sunny Saturday. He didn't raise it or wave. He just held it, his shoulders slumped. A new person who had finally learned to stand up for herself. A new person who had finally learned that some things were worth fighting for. And as I drove away, I knew that I would never be the same again. My family had sold my dream car, but I had made them repay every single cent. And in the process, I had learned that my dignity was worth more than any car, but that even in victory, there was a profound and aching loss.